So I'm going to start tonight with just a single statement that some of us might disagree with, but hopefully you'll give me enough room to explain it. Every single one of us could use some help. Even those of us who say, I hate asking for help. Even those of us who would like to be independent and try to push people away and say, I don't need any help. Every one of us could use some help. There is something going on in all of our lives that is too much for us. Every one of us. We need help. In fact, I believe that we were actually created to need help. In Genesis chapter 2, which is a retelling of Genesis chapter 1. And so, I don't want to get lost. I don't want to get off track, but we need to learn how to better read Scripture. And I know that's what's happening in the small group. That's what you guys are talking about together on Sunday mornings now. But Genesis 2 is not the next thing after Genesis 1. Genesis 2 is a broadening of our picture of Genesis 1. So Genesis 1 is the abridged. Genesis 2 is kind of the unabridged. It starts showing us more of what God was doing, emphasizing on the creation of humanity to be the partners with God over his creation. And so it's in Genesis 2 that God announces it is not good for the man to be alone. And what does he do? He creates Eve. And what does the Scripture describe Eve as? Adam's helpmeet. So just think about this with me for a minute. It was not good for man to be alone, but then when he was no longer alone, when God created both male and female, as Genesis 1:27 describes, that's when God said, it is very good. So a man by himself was not good. Man and woman, as God intended, is very good. Not just better. It's as if God's saying, now this is how I intended things to be. This is what you were created for. We were created to need help from each other. And we were created to be a help for each other. Which means that help is not a response of the fall. It's part of our design. And yet so many of us struggle to ask for help, right? We fight off offers for help. We feel weak or wrong when we discover that we are in need of help. How many times have you started a request for help this way? Sorry to bother you, but I could use some help. Or if we're not willing, and I'm going to be bold here, if we're too prideful to acknowledge that we need help, some of us just begin outright rejecting help. We hate to ask for help. It ends up making our lives more difficult, but often it leaves us alone with our feelings, and we start feeling rejected when we're the ones who did the rejecting, right? We start feeling like there's nobody that's going to help me when we're the ones who refuse to ask for help. We are unwilling to show quote-unquote weakness and then wonder why we're left alone in our quote-unquote strength, when the reality is we are rejecting part of God's created plan for us individually and corporately. We were created to need